Hi, my name is Sarah Seale, and welcome to the Stone Age. Great. My name is Sarah Seale. I'm the managing partner for Cannabis Management Resources up in Canada. So I'm a Barbadian. I moved to Toronto about 4 years ago. I started working in the cannabis industry. I started CMR a year ago. It's a year and a half, a little over a year and a half now. So we're management consultants specifically for the cannabis industry up there. We work with everybody from very large licensed producers to very small startups, people who are just getting involved. We do a lot of advocate work. We're working with a lot of patients, a lot of clinics, a lot on the medical side. So it's quite a wide range that covers what we do.
Why become part of the cannabis industry?
Well, it's fascinating. So I first really got clued into the industry about when we were deciding where we were going to go. My husband and I, we were looking to leave Barbados, and we were trying to decide if we were going to go to Canada, because I'm Canadian, I'm also a UK citizen, to Canada or the UK, which really was the best fit for us. And we went up to Canada. We were sitting by a pool with a friend in Montreal, and he said, have you taken a look at the cannabis industry at all? Have you heard of this guy called Bruce Linton? And Bruce Linton is, up until today, there was a big announcement today actually, up until today he was the CEO of Canopy Growth. And I hadn't really heard anything about it. Like, we knew that Canada was doing something on the legalization framework. It wasn't really being talked about down here. It wasn't the conversation that, the global conversation that was being had anywhere else except for Canada. But I love business, I love strategy, so I started looking at what they were doing, and I was fascinated by it because this one company, Canopy, the cannabis industry is very volatile. You have these new regulations. It's a brand new industry that's being set up. There's so many things that you can't do. And this company was just on the ball. It was every time that there was a slight change, that there was a slight flux in the market, they would just pivot and turn. So from a business strategy point of view, that's kind of what got my interest at the beginning. And then I saw more and more companies jumping onto it, more news. It just became a bigger and bigger conversation. And when you're on the Canadian side of that conversation, it's huge. It's huge. It's everything. It's all anybody talks about. It's all in the news. There are probably about 20 conferences a year. It is all that anybody is talking about in the Canada market right now. So I started following it, and then I got involved with Canopy. Was actually my first client. I was working with them as I was at a recruiting agency, and so I was working with part of a team on one of the roles for them as a recruiter. I started working more into HR, and it just grew from there. And the more deeply that I got involved in the industry, the more people that I got to know, the deeper that I saw it go, the more personally invested I became, the more interested I became. From a business side, it enlivened me. It really did. It excited me a lot. And then I got involved with the patient side of things through Ashley Brown, who was part of the conference. Ashley was the very first patient that I had ever seen stand up on stage and really give their testimony and talk about what they had been through. And it was mind-blowing for me. It was, because I hadn't been thinking of it that way before. I hadn't really been thinking about the actual effect of this. I'd been thinking of what the cannabis industry is from a business and from a strategy point of view. But the amount of lives that it affects, the amount of people, I've seen some truly phenomenal, life-changing stories in the last year and a half. And it's motivated me to get even more involved and to do things like this conference here to try and help bring that education down here as well.
Okay, so since we're talking the medical cannabis industry, can you tell me your definition of the difference between regular cannabis and medical cannabis?
Sure. So from a Canadian standpoint, I mean, it's basically the same thing. The difference is the quality standards. So when you're calling something a medicine, there's a difference between cannabis or CBD as a natural health product, which can be sold as a vitamin supplement, can be sold in a store. You know that it has beneficial properties. A lot of people have been using it, even when you look at the Rastafari religion, and there are a lot of people who've been using this as a natural health supplement for a very, very long time, very effectively. So that's one side of the conversation. The other side is an actual medical property. So you can't make medicine, you have to make medicine in a lab, right? You can't, it has to be very, very strict quality procedures. There are lots of testing protocols that go into place. They're looking at something and trying to make it as consistent as possible. So if you have a bottle of Advil, for example, that you go and you get from a pharmacy, you can rest assured as a consumer that that bottle of Advil, you know exactly what it's going to do to you, you know exactly how it's going to make you feel, you know how many to take, and you trust that company, that every single pill of Advil is going to be the exact same, even if you buy 10 bottles. So that's the difference between the medical side of it and what we call the adult use side of it, or even using it as a natural health supplement. It's that quality, that standard, having doctors and pharmacists involved, really getting very specific about what conditions can be treated, what dosages, writing out prescriptions, having a pharmacist then handle the delivery to the patient. That's the medical pathway from a production standpoint, like all the way to the patient.
But in general, it's basically the same thing. Just the only difference, as you say, it's just production.
Well, it's production and it's quality. So it's the difference between going and smoking something because you think that it's going to help you sleep at night, for example. There are a number of different strains. They might all have the exact same THC level. So even if you do some preliminary testing and you know that this has 17% THC to 2% CBD, for example, one strain is going to be completely different from another strain. And then that same strain, if you grow it under different conditions, it's going to do different things to you. So you're not rest assured that that is going to do the same thing all the time. You need somebody to basically prepare it as a medication so that you can rest assured that you're getting that quality and consistency if you're treating it for a medical condition.
Okay.
And for conditions like some of the ones that we saw at the conference, for migraines, for PTSD, for epilepsy, that consistency level, I mean, that's the difference between basically you having something that will help you from a medical standpoint, or something that's going to turn around and send you to the hospital. You know, slight little differentiations if you have a serious condition can be very, very dramatic in dosage. So in Canada, one of the mistakes that Canada made on legalization was in not leading a patient-led legalization process. So with the help of Dr. Mosley, that's something we're trying to bring attention to. It's very, very important to have the patients and the doctors basically as the first line. Then after talking to Harley, I talked to more doctors, and it was the same sort of conversation. It's like, what do you need? What would make you feel comfortable about this conversation? What can I bring down that will help? And from there, we went on to, Harley introduced me to Dr. Kohal at the university because he's the Deputy Dean of Preclinical Studies for the Faculty of Medicine. And they're leading the cannabis division for UWI. They've partnered with a company called BMC, and they're doing a lot of the medical research, a lot of the clinical trials, the educational programs, education for doctors, education for patients, different cultivation courses are going to be offered by the university. So then it was that conversation of, okay, so it's the next line we need education and we need resources. And so how can we help you with, develop an educational program? Like what do you need? So then we formed a partnership with UE and with BMC to be able to help bring this conference down. And it just sort of grew from there. We just kept on having conversations because then I went out, I was talking to the general public. We're part of a couple of Facebook groups. And I was saying, well, what do you guys need? What questions do you have? Like, if I'm bringing something down, I want to make sure that I'm answering them And one of the biggest problems that the general public was having is anything that's been talked about around cannabis down here so far has been very, very expensive. It's been very exclusive. You basically will have an expert coming in from Jamaica, for example. They're speaking for 2 hours and it's $400. So that rules out 50% of the population. They don't have the resources or the interest. So they're not getting their questions answered. So you have a government who isn't really like detailing out what's happening. You have doctors who really don't have the education and the resources. And anytime that an expert did come in, 50% of the population wasn't allowed to hear them because it was exclusive and it was really expensive. So we said that it was very important to us to make it, first of all, a free event. We wanted to make it at a place that everybody felt comfortable coming. So UE is one of those. It's a great place. It doesn't matter from government officials, like right down the chain, international people. It's a very comfortable space. It's somewhere that everybody feels comfortable going. It's not exclusionary at all, and we wanted to make it free so that as many people that were asking questions were getting it. The next level of conversations that we had was with the Rastafari community, because they're a very big voice. I mean, these clearly are the experts in this industry. They have been, and they've been the most persecuted. And whenever there was a conversation around this, they weren't being invited to it. Sometimes they would come anyway, but 9 times out of 10, they weren't being included in the conversation at all. So we made sure that formal introductions, formal invitations were sent out to the Rastafari Council as well, to ICAR, to make sure they came. I was really happy that 7 of their members came and supported the conference this weekend, and it had some really great questions that they got. I hope some good answers too.
Okay, so what did you think about the turnout of the conference?
It was good. It wasn't on day 1 and day 2. I was disappointed until we got the final tally of the numbers at the end. It looked as though it was only half attended, and we were so oversubscribed that we had so many people calling even after we'd hit there are 306 seats in the hall, and we were flooded by all of these extra people who wanted to come that we had to turn down. But what we realized at the end of the day, because there's a ticket count, everybody had a registration card, there was a ticket count coming in. We did fully get, I think we got 612 people in total over the 2 days. So we did get the full attendance. I think people were just kind of coming and going at different times. But yeah, it was well attended, and one of the nice things is it was engaging. The audience really, sometimes when you get to the question and answer period, everybody just sits down and nobody really engages. But there was a lot of engagement during the sessions. There were a lot of questions that were asked, and there was a lot of engagement outside of the sessions as well. We sat down, we had a couple of hours basically outside of the conference, both before and after, where speakers were just sitting down talking with groups of people about this.
What do you think we're at right now after the conference? We're at in terms of doctors and having the information they need to move forward?
Well, the doctors that I've spoken to that have reached out afterwards, their feedback has been very, very good. They got a lot of information that they needed. We were very lucky as well to have, there was a representative from the Attorney General's office, the director of the drug service came out as well. They were invited, but we weren't sure if they were coming in an official capacity, but they very much stood up and they talked in an official capacity, and they gave a lot of information that we didn't know. So people were walking away. They feel a little bit more confident now. They know exactly what resources are available through the university. Everybody's had a chance to link in or to connect with the doctors and the resources that we brought down as well. Those resources are free, by the way. So it's not that anybody was coming down with an agenda and is going to be providing paid services to the doctors down here. It's a free forum. It's a free educational and resource sharing of information between the medical community. And so I think they feel a lot more confident. They feel as though they at least have somewhere to go. They have something to fall back on resource-wise between the university and between the international market.
Okay, so can we just backtrack a little bit?
Sure.
The difference between regular cannabis and medical cannabis.
Sure.
Now let's talk about the forms of medical cannabis. What forms can they come in?
So right now, you mean for Barbados? The Barbados market in general? Okay. So overseas, in Canada, we have quite a large range of what they're called, what they consider medical cannabis. So it's everything from dried flower, you have oils, you have capsules, they're sprays, they're gummies, they're edibles. There's a very, very wide range of what you can get on the medicinal side. For Barbados, they're starting off with their 5 products that are coming in from the US. They're FDA approved products. So 2 of them are on the synthetic form. The others are more, they're prescription extractions so Epidiolex, for example, is an extraction of CBD that's used very often in epilepsy for children. So that's one of the ones that's coming down. They have different ones that are going to help chemotherapy patients. The director of the drug service said during the conference that they're going to be opening it up past those 5. They're looking to include more whole flower extracts, which is really important, especially on the CBD side. So they are looking to open it up to oils, to capsules, and to vape pens.
Okay. And what is your take on, I think there was a question, there was something that was said at the conference where the dried flower wasn't really considered to be medical cannabis. Can you tell me your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. It's not something, Barbados seems very reluctant to acknowledge dried flower as medicine. I'm not quite sure why that is. I don't know if it's just the smoking aspect of it, because you associate dried flower with smoking, and smoking of any type, doctors tend to shy against it. But there are a lot of different ways that you can use dried flower. You can use it in edibles, you can use it in vaping. Vaping it is still a smoking form, but because the harm with smoking is combustion. So when you actually take something and you light it on fire, that basically is that's the harmful side of it. With vaping, it's still giving off a smoke, but it's a little cylinder. Usually they're made out of ceramic, and it heats it evenly all the way around, so you're not getting that combustion element. And you can take the residue and you can use it. There are other different applications that you can use it for, even after you've smoked it. But Barbados, for some reason, they're not considering that as the first line on the medicinal side. They're looking more towards the FDA formulations as well as oils and capsules.
Would you say, from your experience and conversation with them, that the smoking of the dried flower would no longer see it as a medicine?
No, not at all. I mean, a lot of people, I think the last stat that I saw on smoking, or we'll talk about vaping versus smoking, just because we're talking about medicine.
Yeah.
So it's the difference between a vape and a joint. So smoking, a lot of people tend to use that. I think it's 72% of Canadian patients tend to use vaping over any other method, and it's just because it's more, it's quicker. So as soon as you inhale that smoke, within seconds you're getting relief. If you take oils, it can take up to 40 minutes. If you take edibles, it can take up to an hour. It's very hard on the edible formulation because it takes so long for the effects of it to actually kick in. You have people who will they'll overdose because they think that it's not working or they haven't taken enough, and then all of a sudden it's like they've taken too much, right? So it's something on the smoking side. It's a lot easier to regulate. It hits you quicker. It lasts the maximum amount of time that you're going to feel the effects of it is 90 minutes. So even if you do a little bit too much, that you've got an hour and you're going to feel back to normal again. With edibles, it can last for 6 to 8 hours. The same thing with oils. So smoking tends to be the most, or vaping, I would say, tends to be the most preferred method, unless somebody specifically has a lung condition or they're not interested in smoking themselves.
The reason I'm asking those questions is because I've been talking, when I spoke to Dr. Mike Hart and Dr. Michael and some other people that spoke at the conference, we were discussing the fact that there are actually some patients who are unable to get their medicine because of cost. And given the current economic situation in Barbados, not just Barbados, in the Caribbean right now, cost is going to be a huge factor in terms of being able to access the medicine that's being prescribed to them, which is an issue in terms of regular Western pharmaceutical drugs right now anyway. So with people being able to grow their own and consume it as medicine, do you think that that is going to create more of a positive impact on the society or the patient then?
So my understanding from what the government proposes down here is they're not going to have the simple grow-at-home options that we have in Canada. At least not right now. That's not a conversation that they're having. Okay. In Canada, if you're a medical patient, you're allowed to grow 4 plants on your own, just as a basic medical patient. You can apply for different levels of licenses you can actually grow as a medical patient. You can also grow for 2 other medical patients. So they're different types of regulations. People use that a lot. It keeps down the cost, especially for the patients who are really they really have to use very high levels of it. But in Barbados, as far as I know, that's not a conversation that they've even introduced to the regulations so far.
And in your opinion, how do you think that's going to impact patients?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's an option that's going to be available to them that was never available to them before. So it's one of those things. This is the start of a very long conversation. I think the first step that the government has taken, they're looking at the safest possible method. So they're going the FDA approved route. There are five formulations, and they've been treated as medicines. So they have the clinical trials and the backups and everything that doctors need to be happy. They have the dosing formulations. But that's just a start. It's not the best option long term because it is going to be expensive. They are going to be imported. There are going to be taxes on them. And anything, as you said, any of the imported pharmaceuticals have a very high cost. It would make sense for them to have cultivation here, either that or to be working along with other Caribbean islands who do have larger scale cultivation like St. Vincent or like Jamaica, and having some sort of a reciprocal agreement where we're importing in and we're providing testing facilities or we're providing clinical trials here. The Caribbean very much should be working together on this, not just each island trying to do things all on their own.
So what do you think in terms of the establishment of the framework and the industry in general in Barbados and the Caribbean?
Well, Canadians aren't going to have any part in establishing the framework. So the government very much, they have their own. I mean, we have some brilliant people here on the island, and this conversation's been going on for a couple of years now. The first time that I heard about it was before the press release last year was 2016. So there have been talks around putting in a regulatory framework for almost 3 years now. So I think where the Canadians are concerned, it's just a matter of providing a resource. We have a trade agreement right now between Canada and Barbados. We have the embassy here. There are very, very strong ties between Canada and Barbados. So it just makes sense to make use of those. It makes sense for the Canadian companies. It also makes sense for the Barbadian companies. And they have an option where they can pull resources in from the only country that has federally legalized so far. They are the experts in this field. So it makes sense to at least use those resources. So in terms of the actual setup, there's the first presentation that I did on day 2 talked about what people's perception of the cannabis industry is versus what a legal cannabis industry actually is. So a lot of people that I've been talking to, not just in Barbados, but just across the Caribbean, even in other countries, they think that as soon as a country legalizes, that's it. It's a free-for-all. Everybody with an acre of land in their backyard can go. They can grow, everyone's going to get rich, and we're all going to live happily ever after. And unfortunately, that is not the case. Legalization is extremely expensive. It's a lot more expensive and a lot more rigorous, especially when you're talking about medicinal. Because remember, this is medicinal grade. Medicine isn't grown out in a field. Products might be grown in a field where extracts of them are taken and used in medicine, but medicine itself is not grown in a field. It's grown in very, very stable, quality restricted conditions. So in Canada, for example, a basic greenhouse setup to set up as a licensed producer, so you're talking each grow room is allowed up to 1,000 plants. You're allowed 4 different grow rooms. So not on a massive scale. You're not doing hectares, but at the same time you're doing a decent grow. That's $6 to $8 million Canadian to set up. So that's in terms of just getting your licenses, setting up, constructing, putting everything together, getting your people in place. $6 to $8 million Canadian. So there's smaller ones, but $2 to $3 million on average is what people are spending to set up on the legal side. That's not the only option, however. There are a lot of other things that I have a infograph which I can share with you guys that shows really what people's perception of the industry is, which is on the growing side, and then what the industry actually is. And this is an industry that we've never seen an industry except for the tech industry that has touched every single part of every single business model of every single industry talking in Canada. So whether you like it or not, whether you approve of it or not, the fact is if you are in real estate, your real estate company is looking to set up a division specifically for cannabis because it's growing, it's a brand new industry. If you're in the tech sector, you're thinking about what you can do from a seed to sale platform, what do cannabis companies need, because it's such a huge industry. So there's this boom. There are HR companies that are growing up around it. If you have legalization, then how do you treat your employees? Are you allowed to ask them? You're not. In Barbados, we are allowed to drug test. In Canada, we're not. So they've introduced a framework where they're allowing potentially an unknown substance into the workplace, and they don't even know how to monitor that from a human resources point of view, because they're not allowed to ask employees, what are you taking, what are you on? They're also not allowed to drug test. So they have to use their judgment, and you can't be biased or discriminatory against anybody for taking their medication. So that's a very big problem. So we have entire companies that have opened up around that. You've got companies like mine, which is just general management consulting. We go into a number of different companies and we talk about all sorts of different levels. Everything from recruitment to business strategy to how do you expand a business very quickly to how do you set up a brand new business under this regulatory framework. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a massive amount of opportunity for anybody who is looking, any country that's looking to legalize.
I want you to expand a little more now, because you know about what basically, you have an idea of what the industry is going to look like here. What kind of idea of entrepreneurship you can see now around the kind of industry that we're talking about?
Sure. Okay.
Right? Because even if they don't have a grow, but there have to be other opportunities out there, just in this space at least.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are a number of different entrepreneurship opportunities in the space. So what I tell anybody, whether they're in Canada or overseas, whether they're in this industry or not, is stick with what you know. So if you're somebody who has had a logistics company for your whole life and that's what you know, don't go and try and grow something in a field. You're setting yourself up for failure, and that's not the only option, because there are going to be logistics opportunities. So the product has to, if you have an importation, product has to come into the island, that's logistics. It then has to get from the port to a distribution warehouse. Somebody has to own that distribution warehouse, right? And then there has to be facilities where you're going outside of it. So one of my biggest clients right now is a company called Pineapple Express Delivery. Pineapple Express has a same-day delivery service for the cannabis industry, and they're one of the only ones of their kind because they found that little niche market where there was a need for this industry. They wanted to work in it. They knew their specialization. They had done same-day delivery for 15 years, so they actively looked to see where their part in it could be. And there are opportunities. So if you're a real estate agent, you should be looking at you should be looking at real estate opportunities within the sector. What's needed? If people are growing outdoor, they're going to need land for that. That land then is going to need testing. So that's testing opportunities for anybody who has a research lab or who is working in the agricultural sector that's outside of growing. You're going to need water quality testing and different standards. That's another opportunity basically outside of it. You're going to need somebody to actually build the facilities, because you can't just grow in a field. At the very least, it's going to be greenhouse operated. So where are you getting those greenhouses? Who's putting them up? That's a construction opportunity then that's coming up for anybody in the construction field. So it kind of goes on and on. So I try to tell anybody to, I mean, look at you guys. You're doing a documentary, you know. So it's one of those things that no matter what area you're in, no matter what skill set you actually have right now, there should be a ability to apply that to the industry. And if you can't, then the university is opening up entire curriculums around growing, around HR. There are opportunities then to learn a new field and to be able to get into the sector that way as well.
Synthetics and pharmaceuticals, but smoking is an issue where that's actually natural and someone can actually grow and pick it from the yard, just like they will grow turmeric to deal with inflammation and things like that. So,
yeah.
That's why there was such a big focus as well on the difference between regular cannabis and medical cannabis.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it just has to do with application, you know. So, I mean, if you're growing something in the yard, and so if you are growing turmeric in your yard and you're taking that and you're using that as a natural health supplement, I mean, that's what I do. You know, I was starting to feel sick around the conference, and I have this turmeric, ginger, lemon, and honey. Yeah, a little bit of cayenne pepper. I even go like so far as I chop up some raw garlic and I throw it in there, and I shoot it down as a shot. So that, to me, it has medicinal properties. I'm taking it for medicinal value. It's not medicine because it hasn't been given to me by a doctor, you know. So that's kind of the difference between growing something in your yard, using it in a health way, versus taking something and calling it a medicine. And I think that's one of the reasons why the government is trying so hard to differentiate, and why you kept on hearing every official that got up, whether they were there officially or unofficially, they kept on hammering home that we are talking about medicine. We're talking about medicine, because that's the only conversation right now that they are comfortable with having. I still think it's progressive, because I fully did not expect that Barbados would be having this conversation yet. I thought we were a couple of years away from it, because we've been so conservative, because it is so controversial, right? So I still personally, I see it as a step in the right direction. It definitely has a long way to go. From the socioeconomic side, and who basically will get a place in this. On the cultivation side, if they go the way that Canada goes, David Hyde, the security consultant that we had at the conference, he made a fantastic point where he was talking about different things that we did in Canada that were wrong. They were the wrong way to go. And one of the worst ways that they went is they created a financial barrier, because they made the regulations, they made everything to actually set up a licensed facility so expensive, that $6 to $8 million range. It's only a select few people could actually even engage in that industry. So when you look at it's supposed to be a consumer good, when you look at 50,000 consumer packaged good companies versus there are 100, and I think the last count was 157 licensed producers in Canada, not all of those are selling on the active market. So you only probably have about 10 major players in the field, and this is after years of us going through it. So there was a financial barrier that was put into place underneath the regulations. It was one of the cautions that David and Shlomo basically gave in a nice manner during the conference, that if you are a new country that's looking to set up, you're looking to legalize, you're saying that it's for the people, try to make sure that your regulatory framework does not exclude those same people. It's hard to do, but it's possible. It's entirely possible.
And last question. Since we're talking about business, starting a business in the cannabis industry, managing a business in the cannabis industry, and working for other businesses that were involved or are involved in the cannabis industry, how has that been stigma-wise?
Good and bad. It's weird. The people who I expected to have stigma really haven't. Like, my mother is a fairly conservative, very, very religious. She's an older lady. She's always been very healthy. She's very involved in natural health supplements. She prefers that over going to the doctor. But I didn't really expect her to embrace what I was doing and to be as proud of what I was doing as she has been. She's been phenomenal. She's jumped on board. Where other people that I grew up with that I thought would be more liberally minded, they were the ones actually smoking cannabis at the beach when we were all growing up, right? They have been the judgmental ones that are very against. I get called a drug dealer. Yeah, I'm a drug dealer. Or I'm setting up businesses for drug dealers. So I've gotten a lot of backlash from really unexpected places for the industry that I'm in. There's also a lot of where we call them the legacy growers here on the island. I expected stigma and a bit of a wall put up between me and them because I am white. I am from overseas. I'm not the traditional person that you really have a conversation about cultivation with. And that's been the exact opposite. They've opened the doors. I've gotten messages and WhatsApps and pictures and very, very invested in what legalization could look like. They're very invested in moving over onto the legal market, which again is very, very progressive because we didn't have that in Canada. The black market is still, or even the legacy growers, because there's a difference between edibles and stuff when you're talking about black market products. They're still very much fighting the legal system. They don't like it. They don't want it. They don't feel included in it. They haven't had a part in the conversation, and they hate it. They look at anybody who leaves that market and goes to work at the big licensed producers as a sellout. They get treated very badly. There's a whole big thing to have that same basically contingent in Barbados who are very excited for legalization. They're saying things like, we want a legacy to be able to leave to our kids. We want to be able to grow. We know how to do this. We've been doing it for a long time. We don't want to risk going to jail. We don't want to get shot, so we just want to be able to do this. And this is our industry as well. We want to be able to do what we love. So that I think is very progressive, and it's been a really welcoming segment of society that I kind of thought I would get the most pushback or the most stigma around, and I really haven't. So that's been nice.
Do you have children?
I do. I have one son.
How has that been, navigating those waters with your son?
Well, with him, he's 22, so yeah, so it's a different conversation. So he's very proud of it. I know a lot of ladies, especially in Canada, they have a big problem getting into the industry because of the stigma around it. If they're going to school, they don't want, again, the word drug dealer gets thrown around really casually. People have to stop using it, even in a joke. They have to actually stop using that because it is a legitimate, it is a serious business. I work 7 days a week. I probably clock in about 80 or 90 hours. I work like a doctor right now. So I take a bit of offense when people refer to me as a drug dealer. But a lot of women do have problem with the stigma because when they're going to school and they're sitting on the PTA and everybody's sharing what they do for a living, there's that natural reluctance to share because you're in a cannabis industry and you're all there in a kid's environment.
What tips would you give or advice would you give anyone in Barbados or in the Caribbean that is thinking about starting a business in the cannabis industry or have started a business in the cannabis industry in terms of navigating the stigma?
Mm-hmm. In terms of navigating the stigma, honestly, you have to own it. You have to be proud of what you're doing. You have to be proud of your part in the industry. Expect the pushback. Grow a bit of a thick skin around it because it is a brand new industry and there is a lot of stigma around it. With myself and even with Dr. Mosley, what we try to do is we just try to educate as much as possible. So anytime that there is a pushback, we try to find out, instead of getting upset about it, try to find out what is that pushback. If you think that cannabis leads to psychosis and you have an uncle that is in Blackrock because of psychosis and he was a cannabis user, I understand that. But that's not necessarily the only thing that comes out of cannabis. Here are the studies, and this actually is a case for why you want legalization, because you want that consistency, you want quality products. It might not just be a cannabis effect that has led for that uncle to be, and that's a real situation that I had to deal with. It might not just be the cannabis alone that has led to that uncle being in Black Rock. It might actually be the pesticides that were being placed on that plant. It might be the methods that are being used here. There's some very dangerous methods that are being used by the growers on the island right now in terms of how they're curing, how they're drying. It opens up to pest and to mold and to parasites. All of those different things can then break down and can lead to medical conditions. And you're not even really aware of them. I mean, mold especially. Mold is a very big factor. It can make you very, very ill. If you're then taking something, you're adding a combustion element to it, which already is dangerous, but you're not just combusting the cannabis, you're taking that plus carcinogens and pesticide plus the mold that is grown on it because it hasn't been cured properly, and then you're lighting it on fire and you're taking that into your body, you're poisoning yourself, right? So a lot of the time people tend to be, once you can give them the education behind it, the rational fact, that sort of situation then is not going to occur in a legal framework because you'll have people taking that, making sure that it's proper before anybody consumes it as medication for a specific condition. So it almost is a push towards legalization versus where you started off with this conversation where someone's like, oh, we don't want to legalize this, we don't want anything to do with it, we never want to hear about marijuana or weed on the island. It's like, actually you do, and exactly the reasons why you are so against it is exactly why we need a legal framework, so that there's a safe product for people to consume, so that they don't end up like your uncle in Black Rock.
Got you. Thanks so much.